Hello dear students, welcome back to my channel Nisha VERMA'S tutorial. Dear students, I am here with my new video on the book Flamingo. Main points of the chapter. The boy, friends. He's going to school and he's in a hurry to reach school. When he reaches there, he notices that there is silence everywhere. It looked as if it was a Sunday. The last lesson of French was being read by his teacher and he was very sad and serious. A sudden change comes in the boy's attitude. Regrets. He is concerned about the French language. Mr. Hamel is heartbroken and he leaves the country. And school is dismissed in the end. The last lesson is written by ByAlphonse Daudet. I started for school very late that morning and was in great dread of scolding, especially because Hamel had said that he would question us on participles, and I didn't know the first word about them. For a moment, I thought of running away and spending the day out of doors. It was so warm, so bright, the birds were chirping at the edge of the woods, and in the open field back of the sawmill, the Prussian soldiers were drilling. It was all much more tempting than the rule for participles, but I had the strength to resist and hurried off to school. Our narrator, little Franz, on that day was very late for the school. He was afraid of going to school on that day. The reason behind it was that one thing, he was late. Another thing, that he was supposed to be prepared with the rules of participles, but he hardly knew even a single word about the participle. So there enters in his mind one thought that he should go to the woods, to the jungle, instead of going to the school, being there scolded. He thought of going to the woods to see birds chirping there, and even he could hear Persian soldiers while drilling. That was more tempting, more attractive than the school, than Mr. Hamel's scolding. So he thought of that he should go to the woods. He should not go to the school on that day. But when he thought deeply, then he resisted the thought of not going to the class. He went towards the school. Usually when school began, there was a great bustle which could be heard out in the street, the opening and closing of desks, lessons repeated in unison, very loud, with our hands over our ears to understand better, and the teacher's great ruler rapping on the table. But now it was all so still. I had counted on the commotion to get to my desk without being seen, but of course that day everything had to be quiet as Sunday morning. Through the window I saw my classmates already in their places, and Hamel walking up and down with his terrible iron ruler under his arm. I had to open the door and go in before everybody. You can imagine how I blushed and how frightened I was. Friends, when he reached the school, he noticed something unusual. Something unusual means generally in the school there used to be hustle and bustle. There used to be, one can hear from the street even opening and closing of the desks, repeating of the chapters by the students behind the teacher, and even one can hear the rapping of the ruler on the bench by the teacher. But when Franz saw from the window, he noticed that it looked as quiet as Sunday morning. As dear students, you know, Sunday is a holiday in the school, so school is quiet. But generally there used to be hustle and bustle, lot of noise. But on that day, it was as quiet as Sunday morning, and Franz noticed from the window, he saw inside the classroom, he saw that students, his classmates, they were already on their seats. They were sitting very quietly. Teacher was already in the class, and he was very seriously walking here and there. His ruler was under his arms, and now he has to enter inside the class in front of the teacher, and he has to go. It was so very odd for him to enter into the class in front of the students being so late. So he thought that Mr. Hamel will scold him now for being the late. So friends was so late for the school, and already teacher was inside the class. He was very much afraid of Mr. Hamel, and he was now blushed, frightened, the mixed up emotions he had. But still he has to enter the class. But nothing happened. Hamel saw me and said very kindly, "Go to your place quickly, little friends. We were beginning without you." I jumped over the bench and sat down at my desk. Not till then, when I had got a little over my fright, did I see that our teacher had on his beautiful green coat, his frilled shirt, and the little black silk cap, all embroidered, that he never wore except on inspections and prize days. Besides, the whole school seemed so strange and solemn. But the thing that surprised me most was to see on the back benches that were always empty the village people sitting quietly like ourselves. Old Hauser with his three-cornered hat, the former mayor, the former postmaster, and several other besides. Everybody looked sad, and Hauser had brought an old primer thumbed at the edge, and he had it open on his knees with his great spectacles lying across the pages. While I was wondering about it all, Hamel mounted his chair, and in the same grave and gentle tone which he had used to me, said, "My children, this is the last lesson I shall give you. The order has come from Berlin to teach only German in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine. The new master comes tomorrow. This is your last French lesson. I want you to be very attentive." When Mr. Hamel gave the permission to sit inside the class to little friends, he jumped towards the class. He sat there. It took little time to settle him down. And when he was settled, he noticed that in his classroom, not only his classmates, but the old people of the village were also sitting like the students. And he noticed former mayor, former postmaster, so many people were sitting there. And he was thinking to himself, he was imagining, he was questioning to himself why these villagers must be sitting like the students in the class. Exactly at the time, Mr. M. Hamel, their French teacher, sat on the chair, and he started explaining the reason behind the elder people, the old people of the village being in the class. He told them that he talked on that day in a very gentle tone, in a very soft tone. He told them that orders have come from the Persians, from the Germans, that in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine, in place of French, German will be taught to them. So this was the reason of villagers being present there. He said that it was the last lesson of the French on that day. French was on that day very attentive. He wanted to attend all the class very attentively. What a thunderclap these words to me! Oh, the wretches! That was what they had put up at the town hall. My last French lesson. Why? I hardly knew how to write. I should never learn any more. I must stop there then. Oh, how sorry I was for not learning my lessons, for seeking birds' eggs, or going sliding on the Saar. My books that had seemed such a nuisance a while ago, so heavy to carry. My grammar and my history of the saints were old friends now that I couldn't give up. And M. Hamel too. The idea that he was going away, that I should never see him again, made me forget all about his ruler and how cranky he was. Poor man! It was in honor of this last lesson that he had put on his fine Sunday clothes, and now I understood why the old men of the villages were sitting there in the back of the room. It was because they were very sorry too that they had not gone to school more. It was their way of thanking our master for his 40 years of faithful service, and of showing their respect for the school that was theirs no more. When little Franz sat in the class, settled himself inside class, and when teacher told him that it was the last lesson of his French language, then it was very shocking for him. It was very shocking for him. And he was now feeling very sorry. He was feeling very sorry for the language. He was feeling very sorry for the teacher, for Mr. M. Hamel, although he hardly liked him. He now changed his views towards the language, towards the French teacher. The French teacher who seemed to him to be very rude, who always used his ruler. He forgot all about it. He forgot all about the ruler. He forgot all about his cranky nature. And the books, which was very heavy for him earlier, which was a burden for him earlier, because he hardly took any interest in the French language, suddenly seems to him like old friends, because he was going to miss them all, because next year onward he will be unable to read this, study this subject, this language. Now it was really very shocking for him, and his all cranky nature, rude behavior of his teacher, this all made change his mind towards him. Now he was feeling sorry for him, because this teacher has served for 40 years there, and now he comes to know that why Mr. M. Hamel was wearing that special dress, that special frilled dress, that silk cap, which generally he used to wear on special occasions like inspections, annual functions. On special days he used to wear such kind of dress. Now Franz comes to know that why this teacher was wearing this special dress. Now Franz comes to know the reason of elders of the villagers sitting in the class like the students. Now these people have come there to thank Mr. Hamel for his 40-year service. Now they have come to here to show some respect to the country, towards the country. They have come here because they have missed the class also. Now they, as it was the last lesson, they wanted to attend this last lesson of French language. While I was thinking of all this, I heard my name called. It was my turn to recite. What would I not have given to be able to say that dreadful rule for the participles all through, very loud and clear and without one mistake. But I got mixed up on the first word and stood there, holding on to my desk, my heart beating and not daring to look up. I heard Mr. Hamel say to me, "I won't scold you, little friends. You must feel bad enough. See how it is. Every day we have said to ourselves, 'Bah, I have plenty of time. I learned it tomorrow.' And now you see where we have come out. Ah, that's the great trouble with Alsace. She puts off learning till tomorrow. Now those fellows out there will have the right to say to you, 'How is it you pretend to be Frenchmen, and yet you can neither speak nor write your own language?' But you are not the worst, poor little friends. We have all a great deal to reproach ourselves with. Your parents were not anxious enough to have you learn. They preferred to put you to work on a farm or at the mills, so as to have a little more money. And I have been to blame also. Have I not often sent you to water my flowers instead of learning your lessons? And when I wanted to go fishing, did I not just give you a holiday?" Then from one thing to another, Hamel went on to talk of the language, of the French language, saying that it was the most beautiful, language in the world, the clearest, the most logical, that we must guard it among us and never forget it. Because when a people are enslaved, I repeat, dear students, this line particularly to you, because when people are enslaved, as long as they hold fast to their language, it is as if they had the key to their prison. Then he opened a grammar and read our lesson. I was amazed to see how well I understood it. All he said seemed so easy, so easy. I think too that I had never listened so carefully and that he had never explained everything with so much patience. It seemed almost as if the poor man wanted to give us all he knew before going away and to put it into our heads at one stroke. When little Franz was listening, attending the class very attentively, exactly at that time Mr. Hamel called his name. And he stood up. He wanted to answer whatever the question Mr. Hamel will ask him, but he got mixed up. He could not utter even a single word. As usually, he stand still there without answering any question. But on that day, Mr. Hamel didn't scold him. He was very polite with him. He talked in very gentle voice. He said he felt very sorry for little Franz because little Franz hardly knew even a single word about the French language. He felt sorry and he blamed everyone for this. Not only Franz, but his parents. Parents preferred to send him to the farm instead of to the school. He himself, Mr. Hamel, whenever he was not interested in taking the class, he used to give them holidays and go to fishing. And even sometimes he used to give punishment to little Franz for not learning the chapter, not learning the language properly. He used to send him to water his plants. So he thought that everyone was responsible for little Franz because people were less interested in their own language. They thought of that, okay, they'll keep on learning, they will learn later on, they will learn it tomorrow, they will learn it the next day. But you know, students, the next day never comes, the tomorrow never comes. As they kept on lingering the work, the work was never done. It was never finished. So was the case with the French people. The French people who got less interested in their own language, now the day has come when they were deprived of this language, when they were not allowed to read, study, write their own language in their own country. It was now very bad because now the Germans wanted their own language. They wanted to enforce their own language on them. And Mr. Hamel wanted on that day, on that very last day of his chapter, on that very last day of his lesson, he wanted that everyone, including Franz, everyone should on that day listen carefully to their language. They should understand their language very well, and the things which they are deprived of, they should learn it. They should understand that how important their language was for them. They should understand that it is like a key to the prison. It is like a key to the prison. Means if they know their language, whatever may happen, maybe the people will come, they will enforce to read, to write, to learn, to study some other language. But if they are having the knowledge of their own language, then there is no eraser, there is nothing like which can erase from their mind their own language, which can erase their love for their own language. So on that day, whatever Mr. Hamel taught to them, everyone understood it very easily. The reason behind it was, dear students, that every one of them were taking interest in the last lesson. Because they were interested, they wanted to on that day learn each and every word spoken by Mr. Hamel to them. Mr. Hamel taught them lot of things, and whatever things he taught, every one of them understood it very nicely. Now, Mr. Hamel also wanted to put everything within one stroke into their head, into their mind. He wanted to make the last lesson very memorable. He wanted that every one of them should understand each and every word spoken by him. After the grammar, we had a lesson in writing. That day Mr. Hamel had new copies for us. Written in a beautiful round hand, Franz, Alsace, Franz, Alsace. They looked like little flags floating everywhere in the schoolroom, hung from the rod at the top of our desk. You ought to have seen how everyone set to work and how quiet it was. The only sound was the scratching of the pens over the paper once some beetles flew in. But nobody paid any attention to them, not even the littlest ones, who worked right on tracing their fishhooks as if that was French too. On the roof, listen this line carefully, students. On the roof, the pigeons cooed very low, and I thought to myself, will they make them sing in German, even the pigeons? So, little Friends was very interested on that day in the chapters, in the lesson, and Mr. Hamel taught them each and every word. He taught them grammar. He has brought the new notebooks for them, and on that notebooks he has written in big bold letters, France, Alsace, France, Alsace. It looked like the flags. And all the students were very attentive. They were silent, they were quiet, they were quietly listening to the teacher. There was pin drop silence in the class. No one was distracted on that day. Even when the beetles flew inside the classroom, no one bothered those beetles like other days. Even the littlest ones were paying attention towards Mr. Hamel. So, exactly at that time, Little Friends notices that on the roof there were the pigeons, and pigeons cooed. When the pigeons cooed, it strikes in his mind that whether will the Germans be able to make these pigeons even coo in their own language? Dear student, why he thinks like that? You see, students, the pigeons, they coo only. That is their own language. It is within them. So no one can change them. No one can enforce them to coo in other language. They will coo only because they are pigeons. It is their language. They know their language. So this is the same case, dear students, with the French people. The French people, as Mr. Hamel was explaining to them, if they know their language, if they love their language, so no one can erase their own language from their mind. No doubt Germans will force their own language, but they cannot deprive them of speaking in their own language because they know it. The thing is this, one should know their own language. As he has said earlier also, it is a key. It is like a key of the prison. If you are inside the prison, you don't feel like prisoner. Why? Because you are having the key with you. So same is the case with these French people. If they will know their own language, then hardly matters if they are able to read and learn in this language anymore or not. If they are having the knowledge of this language, then no one can force them to leave this language, to erase this language from their own mind. Whenever I looked up from my writing, I saw M. Hamel sitting motionless in his chair and gazing first at one thing, then at another, as if he wanted to fix in his mind just how everything looked in that little schoolroom. Fancy, for 40 years he had been there in the same place, with his garden outside the window and his class in front of him. Just like that. Only the desks and benches had been worn smooth, the walnut trees in the garden would lay taller, and the hawthorn that had planted himself twined with the window to the roof. How it must have broken his heart to leave it all. Poor man! To hear his sister moving about in the room above, packing their trunks, for they must leave the country next day. But he had the courage to hear every lesson to the very fast. After the writing, we had a lesson in history, and then the babies chanted their ba, ba, bee, bee, boo, boo. Down there at the back of the room, old Hauser had put on his spectacles and, holding his primer in both hands, spelled the letters with them. You could see that how he too was crying. His voice trembled with emotion. It was so funny to hear him that we all wanted to laugh and cry. It was so funny to hear him that all we wanted to laugh and cry. Ah, how well I remember. How well I remember it, the last lesson. All at once the church clock struck 12. Then the angels. At the same moment, the trumpets of the Persians returning from drill sounded under our window. Mr. Hamel stood up, very pale, in his chair. I never saw him look so tall. My friends, said he, I. But something choked him. He could not go on. Then he turned to the blackboard, took a piece of chalk, and bearing on with all his might, he wrote as large as he could. Vive la France, long live France. Then he stopped and leaned his head against the wall, and without a word, he made a gesture to us with his hands. School is dismissed. Dear student, pay the attention. School is dismissed. You may go. So, dear students, Mr. Hamel was teaching them with his all might, with his all energy, with his kindness, with his gentle tone. But he was very sad, he was very upset because he has to leave the school. He has to leave that school where he has served for 40 years. He has planted each and every plant in his garden, and he was going to miss all the things of the school, of the garden. So he wanted to keep all these things in his memory. So he was fixing his eyes, sometimes on one thing, another time on another thing. So as he was going to miss all these things, his sister has packed all his luggage because now he has to leave the school. And the time now struck 12, the clock now struck 12, and it was the time to close the school. But on that day, dear student, he has not closed the school, rather he has dismissed the school. He was unable to say any word, he was unable to utter a single word because his throat not chucks. He is unable to utter a single word. So instead of saying anything, he picks up chalk in his hands and write on the blackboard in big bold letters, that is Vive la France, means long live France. He wanted to realize each and every person sitting in that classroom that how important their country was for them, how important their language was for them. So he dismissed the school, means school was closed forever. That's it. So dear student, I hope I have explained the chapter properly to you, and I hope that you will understand this chapter very well. Now I'll discuss the questions of this chapter also with you. For that I need to make another video, and within 1 or 2 days I'll make another video and explain all the question answers for you also, so that you may prepare it for the examination. So keep on watching my video, subscribe my channel, press the bell icon button for my new notification, for my new videos. Till then, goodbye.